You're listening to Aviation Marketing Hangar Flying, the community for the best sales and marketing professionals in the aviation industry. You can't learn to fly just from a book. You learn from other pilots who know the tools, the skills, and the territory. Your hosts, John and Paula Williams, are your sales and marketing test pilots. They take the risks for you and share strategies, relevant examples, hacks, and how-tos. Be sure to subscribe on iTunes so you won't miss a thing.
Welcome to episode number 26. Today we're going to try something new, and that is to do our book club discussion on the air. Now, our book club is for the Aviation Marketing Masterclass. We send a book to our silver members and above, and we put a whole bunch of bookmarks in there with our notes on different things that we want to call people's attention to about the book that we think are particularly relevant for the aviation industry. And those are things that we want to talk about with our group members. And our group members are some of the smartest people in the industry. So we learn a lot, and we think they learn a lot, and it's a great experience for everyone. Welcome to this month's book club discussion. Today we're talking about John Jantsch's The Referral Engine, and I hope I am pronouncing that correctly. But The Referral Engine is one of my favorite marketing books. I think I first read it about 3 years ago and have read it several times since and have gone back and applied a lot of what's in the book to what we do at ABCI. I'm Paula Williams.
And I'm John Williams.
And we are ABCI. And ABCI's mission is
to help everybody sell more products and services in the aviation world.
Absolutely. And this is kind of a different picture of us. And then we've got a different picture of Bert Boda. And Bert is also an author. And this is your book, right?
Correct.
Fantastic. You want to talk a little bit about your book, Bert?
Yes, it's more of an autobiography about my life, but it includes a lot of pretty poignant pieces about my background as an aviator with TWA and NetJets. But it's also a journal about my life, searching for answers to questions that I didn't realize that I had. So getting a lot of good reviews, and I am using it in ways that I didn't realize I ever would. I am a mentor for some kids in a school where kids have dropped out of traditional schools, and I'm using it. The kids are reading the book, and then we discuss it, and then I have them journaling about their answers to the questions that we raise in the class. So that's a way I hadn't anticipated it being used outside of aviation.
Oh, fantastic. So this is not new to you, this concept of, taking stuff, using a book to really improve your life and or your business and other people's lives and or businesses.
Part of it is my my introduction to aviation, trading my need for speed as an late 50s hot rodder in San Francisco from racing hot rods through the streets of the city and on the local drag strips into flying jets for TWA and then NetJets. So it has something for everyone, for aviators, for people who are interested in spiritual journey, if you will, and lots of interesting stories that I've gathered over the years.
Race cars, airplanes, and so on. And that segues pretty nicely. Obviously, what really astonishes me sometimes is that people will take the most exciting industry in the world, which is aviation, and they will try to make it boring.
Boring is probably considered safe.
Mm-hmm.
But safe isn't really where you want to be in business. You don't want to be too far out there, but out there far enough where people are asking you questions.
One of the things that we've run across a lot when we look at aviation websites, aviation company websites, aviation company materials and things like that is that you could swap out one logo for another and it looks like it could mean anything. This corporate speak of, our mission is to serve our customers in the optimum capacity for which we endeavor, just the corporate speak that doesn't say anything. And it's like they're intending to take all of the risk out of what they're promising their customers.
Mm-hmm. And as far as John's concerned, I didn't realize, I guess I didn't hear before that he was a helicopter pilot. So there's nothing boring about flying helicopters. So he would never fall into that trap, I'm sure.
That's true. Exactly. And
so with respect to business, though, you need to have something that separates you from the crowd. It doesn't have to be a whole lot, but it has to be something that lets people know that you're different.
right.
Yeah, exactly.
I think the main thing is if you are bored, you are boring, you know. So I mean, if you are bored by the aviation industry, you should not be here. Because there are plenty of people who have a real passion for what they do, where that could really shine through and serve the customers a lot better and make a whole lot more sense than people who are just pushing paper around and doing a job.
It also has a lot to do with safety as well, because I know when I was flying for the airline that if you had a pilot who you were flying with who was complacent or he was bored, all he was doing is putting his head down, getting towards retirement, which seems to be the case in more than a few situations amongst some of the major carriers right now, where the pilots are approaching retirement age. That could be could be problematic when it regards to safety, not just from an awareness standpoint for pilots, but from the standpoint of, like, say, for a captain who's just complacent. He sets the tone for the cockpit, and he can lull his other crew members into a false sense of security by that complacency, and that's something you don't need when you're flying airplanes. I think that I noticed a distinct difference in coming from a 121 carrier like TWA to NetJets. You don't have time to get bored at NetJets. Everything's changing so fast. It's like a moving target.
Mm-hmm.
For one day you're going somewhere, and you get a call from the company to go somewhere else, and you're flying into you're flying multi-million-dollar jets into airports with no towers, taking off VFR, 250 knots up to 10,000 feet. So you don't have a chance to really get bored. You're always alert. And that's one thing good about that kind of flying for fractionals, is that adventure, that excitement. So it's a very different environment.
Well, I started off flying charter and light twins, and we did one better than that. We would go land in pastures and drop people off and wait under a tree until they came back, and they'd have somebody in a pickup come pick them up right there.
Yeah.
I mean, you file to the nearest airport and then you cancel on your way in.
Right. That was a light twin. Would you think you were flying helicopters at the time, John?
No, that was later.
Okay.
That's true. But, I think it comes back down to if you are bored by what you're doing, and, it's real easy to do that because there's so many regulations and things nowadays that, you can get really lulled into this bureaucracy and things like that, you really have to find a way to be interesting and make it interesting in your marketing and in everything, so that you are giving your customers what they deserve. So
right.
The next piece that jumped out at me was the tragic referral reality. And I think these numbers are from John Janch's research in industries in general. And he did a pretty extensive survey through his company, Duct Tape Marketing. And in aviation, I would say that most companies that we have talked to in aviation, not just 63.4%, I would say it's probably more like 80% of business owners feel that more than half of their business comes from referrals or repeat business. Would you agree, John?
Yes, and the worst part of that is that the majority of business in aviation have nothing in place to generate referrals.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
They will, one or two will tell you they all get their most of business through word of mouth, but they don't generate it. It just sort of happens.
That's what I found interesting about the book. It just kind of tweaked my thinking on how to partner up with other businesses and how to do co-create content, things like that. It was very valuable from that standpoint for me. I hadn't considered that before. So now all I have to do is find the time to be able to do that, kind of implement those kinds of strategies.
Right. And what kills me is every year, the most requested topic is prospecting. But prospecting is the most expensive, crushing labor kind of activity that there is, because you can make 5 cold calls versus 1 warm call and have the same impact. It takes 5 cold calls to make a great contact and move somebody closer to the sale versus 1 warm contact. Almost every time you can at least make some progress, either with more information or another referral or progress toward a sale. So,
if you've been in business for 3 or 4 years, there's no reason you don't have referrals. All you have to do is ask for them.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. Right. And so that's why I think this book is so important. We always tell people this is the most cost-effective place to put your marketing money, is into a referral program. So if you pick up a standard marketing textbook from 20 years ago, or if you've been to a marketing class in a university or anything like that, they've probably talked about the 4 Ps, which are product, price, place, and promotion. John Jantsch, in his book, actually promotes a slightly different model called the 4 Cs, which is content, context, connection, and community. And here we talk a little bit about the difference between the two and why the old model was great for university programs and things like that for people who are going into Fortune 50 companies. And the 4 Cs is a lot more practical for people who have a more specific set of customers, like in aviation, like most of us who are in slightly smaller companies with slightly smaller advertising budgets. John, you know quite a bit about the next one. I know you talked about the 4 Ps in your MBA class, right?
Yeah, in business school they talk about this, and the problem is if you're going to use the 4 Ps, you better have a lot of money. Because you're going to have to do a lot of testing. Assuming you have a product, then you have to figure out what price you want it at, where do you want to do it, and what kind of promotion. Do you want market share, market penetration? I mean, there's lots of things to consider, and it all takes money. We ran marketing simulations through a software program, and the thousands and hundreds of thousands of dollars it took, and it was just like playing a game so you get an ROI. Mm-hmm. The problem is you can't play that out here unless you're very wealthy and have a lot of money to play with. Whereas the 4 Cs of marketing, which you can talk about, are a whole lot easier and less expensive.
Right. So the 4 Ps were actually written by people who were doing marketing for Coca-Cola and Pepsi and Nike and some of the big brands that have a shocking amount of money, or at least shocking to the rest of us.
Well, at the time I went through business school, Coca-Cola was spending 70 cents of every dollar on marketing.
Mm-hmm.
Now think about that. That is a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
None of us can afford
and it was mostly just brand placement. It was just you have to get it out there because they're big enough they can do that, but the rest of us typically are not.
Right. They've had 100 years and billions of dollars behind them to get to the place where all they have to do is put a Coke symbol on a sign in the middle of, South Korea or probably even North Korea and have everybody know exactly what they're talking about. And we've seen a lot of aviation companies spend an awful lot of money on their logo. And then, when they do an ad in one of the major magazines, it's mainly their logo with very little about what they do or who they are or who they're for or what, what they do for whom. So that's a really big mistake that I think some of the MBA programs do a really big disservice to their students because they assume that they're all working for Fortune 100 companies, and that's not true. Probably Fortune 50 companies,
That's right.
actually. So,
Anyway.
yeah.
I just had a thought that Coke has a benefit that the rest of us are not party to, in that their product is, I don't mean this in a wrong way, somewhat addictive. Once you start drinking Coke, you can be hooked on that. I mean, it's not called Coke by any stretch of the imagination.
That secret recipe from the 1800s really was.
Tell you a little story about Coke. I was in Germany for a while, and my sister came over, and I was taking her around, and we were in Heidelberg, and we parked the car. This was back before the Euro. And we went back to get the car after doing what we were doing, and I didn't have any Deutschmarks with me. I thought, oh, man. And he wouldn't take dollars, and he happened to see a six-pack of Coke in the front seat, and he says, "Is that Coke, real U.S. Coke?" And I said, "Well, yeah." He said, "You give me one, you're good to go." So I gave him two.
Wow.
And he just about fell out of his chair.
I got a deal. Yeah, well, listen, keep that in mind when they start to devalue the dollar and come up with some alternative currency.
Yeah.
Really?
Alternative currency in a can. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, the 4 Cs, I think, are kind of an update and also an adaptation for smaller businesses. So rather than the 4 Ps, the 4 Cs: content, context, connection, and community. And, Bert, you're an expert on content and also connection and community. So putting those things into place, being able to make a connection with your customer. Aviation is such a trust-based industry that the only way to make a sale is to get as quickly as you can over that trust hurdle. We like to call it the brick wall. When you first pick up the phone and talk to someone, there is this brick wall there because they don't know you or like you or trust you yet. So getting past that brick wall as quickly as possible, the simplest way to do that is to develop content. Since we've been doing our podcast, when I call people on the phone, a lot of people will tell me, I recognize your voice. And I'm like, really? So you found our podcast on iTunes or somewhere else? And they tell me all about it. They were looking for something on the web and they found it and they started listening. And so now my voice is familiar to them. So they already feel like they have a connection. They kind of know where I stand on some things. They're not going to suggest a brand advertisement because they know how I feel about that. There's a lot of things that they've learned just in, maybe even 20 minutes of listening to us. Same thing with articles, same thing with any content that you build that creates a connection. And Bert, I know you know more about, this is your area of expertise here.
I found it's thanks for mentioning that, because I had a great experience. About 2 weeks ago, I went to a AOPA flight instructor renewal course. Mm-hmm. And I brought a bunch of my books with me and some brochures from my copywriting business. And I asked the instructor if during one of the breaks I could get up and talk about the book as well as my brochures. He said, sure. I sold a whole ton of books there and passed out a bunch of brochures just by asking. Mm-hmm. And that to me was like, in that context of aviation oriented people, it was all you had to do was ask and they were interested. So I don't know what it has to do with what we were just talking about, but I think about it in terms of context.
Right. Right. And content, because you have a book that is content, that is something that everybody wants. Especially if you have a book that maybe you're giving away as part of your sales process. You have something that has a really high perceived value. You have a buyer's guide on advanced flight training. That would be something that a lot of people would be interested in to know, what are the 10 questions I should be asking before I invest in advanced flight training. That content is something people will see as a way to connect with your company and say, maybe I'm not that versed in what questions I should be asking. I certainly don't want to sound stupid. But if they can provide something like that that helps me work through the process or work through the decision-making process and be an educated customer, then that puts it in context for me. That makes a connection. And then also if I can see other people, like in a webinar or a podcast or something like that, where I can see other people who are having the same experience, I make that connection and I can help build that community. Another great community that John and I are familiar with is the Harley Owners Group. I know they have some aviation related ones, like the Mooney Owners Group I know is really super active. And some others that, where people who have made a purchase of a certain aviation product get really involved with each other. And that kind of helps support the sales process and the customer support process as well.
Yeah, the Hog Group is a very unique group of people. I rode Harleys for many years, and I was riding them when it wasn't popular.
Uh-huh.
It was, they were outlaws. Now I have an interesting theory on this, that people need to belong.
Yeah.
And there's so many, especially men, who are isolated, and they still have this need to belong. So when they buy the Harley, they buy the leather jacket, they buy the look, they buy everything, and they're instantly accepted into that group, and it solves their isolation problem. They become part of that group, and they belong. It's pretty cool for them. Yeah,
that's true. I've seen the same thing when I go to a show or something like that, wearing a Cessna shirt, with the with the Skyhawk on it. That shows that I am not one of the airline pilots. It kind of puts me in a particular group, and other people who are like me will seek me out and, this is a private pilot. This is somebody that's kind of like me. I have something in common with this person, and I can talk to them while all of the professional pilots go off and do their thing. So that's
right. Reminds me of one of the T-shirts that were popular when I was flying back in the 70s and 80s. Some of the flight attendants had it made up, and it said, "Marry me and fly free."
There you go.
Yep.
And I think anything that you can do to promote community among the people that buy from you. And, what ABCI does, of course, is we have our marketing masterclass where we get our customers or our clients together. A lot of them are having the same challenges. A lot of them find, like a lot of our folks are in aviation maintenance or sell aviation maintenance software of one kind or another. They don't compete with each other because they sell different pieces of the same puzzle, but they have a lot of similar customers or overlap among their customers. So putting together some joint marketing ventures can really save them a lot of time and hassle, and can help them kind of join their communities together and really kind of help people see, do some educational things, and it really opens up their possibilities for word of mouth as well by building that community bigger than any one company, because some of our companies are pretty small, right? There are 4 questions in the book, and Bert, you use 5 questions when you do our number highlights.
Yes, I find it, for me, it's valuable because it gets me to know people up front. Mm-hmm. The question that we include, and the question that we include now, I put in first place, is tell me a little bit about your background and how you arrived at aviation at this point in your life. So it not only gives me information, but it seems to make the connection between my interviewee and myself, and it seems to warm up the interview and proceed in a better way than just throwing questions at him cold. So,
right.
Yeah.
Exactly. And what John Jantsch suggests in the book is that, any business can do this with any of their suppliers or customers or anyone else, because the best way to get referrals is to give referrals. The problem is a lot of times we don't know our own customers or our own suppliers well enough to know what would be a good referral for this person. So these questions are really designed to kind of ferret that out. How would I make a good referral? Because there's some risk to me when I make a referral. Am I going to look silly? by referring the wrong kind of person or, the wrong kind of a situation to this company, their service isn't a good fit. So, there's lots of things that could go wrong with making a referral. And what these questions are designed to do is to really focus that in. Another thing that's interesting is that a lot of people have a lot of hesitation in answering these questions. They may not know the answers themselves about their own company. But if you spend the time to really develop a great answer, you know your own company better and your own products and services and so on. Have you found that, Bert, when you're interviewing people, do they have this right on the tip of their tongue, or do they need to think for a while, or what's your experience with that?
Depends on the person and how familiar they are with their own business. Some of them have been hawed a little bit, and other ones, what I do now is I send the questions out prior to the interview, so they have a chance to review it. And in one case, a lady actually wrote down the answers to all the questions, so it made my job a lot easier in transcribing it.
Yep.
But it also allowed her to pinpoint the answers to the questions much better. So.
Right. And I know who you're talking about. She's actually a writer, so that's her style. So she's using her own strengths to make this work for her, this process, which I think is wonderful.
Right.
Some people are talkers, some people are writers, some people are both. So that's a wonderful thing. All right, so next month's book is No BS Brand Building. There is a lot of BS in brand building. I think there's a lot of voodoo in the marketplace about, what makes a good brand, what are the magic words, the magic colors, the magic symbols, and so on about branding. And there really isn't a lot of magic to it. It's actually a lot more science than art. Of course, art does go into it, but and creativity and all of those things. But I think a lot of aviation people are really relieved to find that there is a process to building a really strong brand. And this book does a really good job of doing this. And Bert, you're going to love this one because it was written by, Dan Kennedy plus Forrest Walden and Jim Cavalli. They're two partners who started a company called Iron Tribe Fitness. And I know this doesn't sound relevant to aviation, but if you bear with me for just a second, what they did with Iron Tribe is the complete opposite of what most gyms do. Most gyms try to sell you memberships on the premise that you're not going to show up. They sell a whole bunch of gym memberships in January. Everybody buys them, and then they go 2 or 3 times, and then they never show up at the gym again. I mean, that's what the statistics say. And what Iron Tribe did was they have a limit of, I don't remember what the limit is, like 30 people or, whatever, who can belong to an Iron Tribe. And then they are all accountable to each other to reach their goals. So it's the complete opposite. And, they do a really good job of differentiating themselves from every other gym out there. And what that does that I think is relevant to aviation is, number one, it's elitist. This is not for everyone, so this is an exclusive situation. A lot of us are selling exclusive products or luxury products or limited products. So I think, that's really smart, the way that they go about doing it that way. And then the second thing is that they are selling what has become almost a commodity in the market. You can get a gym membership for $9.99 in pretty much any city there is. And these guys are selling memberships that are, I think, several $100s a month and are doing very well at it. So if you have a high ticket item, their method or their experience is really, really helpful in showing how to do that. So I think you're really going to like this book, especially you, Bert. We thought about you when we picked this one out.
I like it already. I just started reading it, and it reminds me of a gym that I belong to here in Petaluma. I belong to it, realize that it's a very social gym. And a friend of mine who's 92 years old, and he looks like he's 60 and acts like he's 40, he and I got together, and he's been in the club for like 30 years. And we got together, and he knew my background about leading men's groups. And he said, there's a bunch of guys in this club that need to tell their story. So we got together and started this group. Now there's like 30 men who come and meet weekly for coffee and donuts. But it also leads into men talking about their lives in a way that they've never been able to before. And it's enhancing, the point is, it's enhancing the club's membership, because a lot of the men hear about this and the word spreads and people join the club wondering what this place is all about. So it's very cool.
Yeah, exactly. And then the last point about this is that, one of the points that they make is that you can't buy a brand. You can't just go to a marketing company or a design company and say, plunk down $1,000 and or 10,000, 100,000 bucks like you could in the days of Mad Men, and have them come up with a package and you just slap it on everything and it's going to magically work. The brand is something that comes from the inside of your company, and it really has to be what differentiates you from your competition. And without doing that deep analytical work, it doesn't matter how much you spend on shiny logos and beautiful stationery. It is not going to do you any good, because anybody can do that nowadays. And what people are really looking for is that authenticity. And those connections. So that's really what brands are built on. So we're really looking forward to next month, and we're going to have, I think, another conversation like this one. So if you have read the book and you have, you do want to talk about it with us, we'd love to have you join us next month, and we will go through the bookmarks in the book, and also anything in addition that you find that was not bookmarked. We'll talk about that too. So. We'll see.
I left the bookmark in place this time.
Oh, good. Yeah, Bert took out all the bookmarks thinking that they were in his way. Actually, we do think very carefully about, what in this book are the 4 or 6 or 10 things that we really want our clients to focus on, because we know your time is valuable and you may not have time to read the whole book. And although I think everybody should read everything because I'm that kind of person, I do understand that not everybody is that way, and not everybody is a bookworm or an avid reader or has time or energy to do that. So if you even just look at the bookmarks, you're going to be 1,000 times better off than if you didn't crack the book. So please do.
I find it interesting that Kennedy is so popular. Not so much that he's not very prolific, or he doesn't write great material. He does, but he's kind of cantankerous, and he's kind of his own boss, his own person. And I would think that might have turned people off, but his quality of what he writes and produces, I think, tends to overcome his cantankerous personality.
And if you think about what he says, even though it's cantankerous, a good portion you have to agree with what he says.
Exactly. Yeah.
We're actually going to talk about that when we talk about branding next month. Personal branding is something that Dan Kennedy, and if you want to take it to an even more extreme, Donald Trump has a personal brand that repels some people and attracts others. And it's very deliberate, and it is very carefully done for a specific purpose. And with Dan Kennedy, he wants to attract a certain type of person. And I am not his ideal client, but, I've gotten past that. John is his ideal client. John loves what he writes. And I've gotten to the point where I kind of do. So it's an acquired taste.
I do too. I didn't mean that it wasn't powerful. I just meant that if you take some of his stuff, who he is personally, you're definitely overlooking the value of what he writes.
That's
yes.
That is absolutely true. So we'll talk about that too. Sometimes turning some people off with a personal brand is not a terrible thing. But that's a nice segue. We'll be talking about that a lot more as we go through personal branding and the brand topics this month and next. I'm looking forward to a really animated conversation because this is a very provocative book as well. So it's a fun read.
Good. Looking forward to it.
All right. Well, we'll talk to you next month then. Some folks have asked us, how can I promote my aviation product or service with a podcast? And it's actually a really great idea because there are a lot more people listening to podcasts nowadays. There's a much larger audience for podcasts than there was even 5 years ago. And there are some really respected podcasts out there, but not a whole lot. The market certainly isn't saturated for a lot of aviation topics. So you may be the only one out there that's talking about aviation insurance or a specific type of training or software. There's lots of different areas of the aviation industry that don't have a great podcast. So if you've been thinking about it, we put together a tip sheet, how to sell more aviation products and services with a podcast. And the way to get to that is you go to abci1.com/host your own podcast. And once again, abci1 Alpha Bravo Charlie India #1.com/host your own podcast. And you'll find the tip sheet there.
Thanks for joining us for Aviation Marketing Hangar Flying, the best place to learn what really works in sales and marketing in the aviation industry. Remember to subscribe on iTunes and leave a rating.
You could be larger than life.